Alright, thank you for tuning in to Chompin at the Bit. This is episode 37. This episode is going to take a look back at the college football weekend, give you some observations from some of the games that I did watch, give you some of the big results over the past weekend as well, give you my, updated playoff field right now, the top four, as well as those, best available teams that are still in contention. And also give you just an update as the final big conference will start its play this upcoming weekend. So all the divisions and the conferences that planned on playing their season so far, they will be in play at this point. So now we can really start looking at teams positioning themselves towards the playoff four. But before I get into that, do want to touch on, kind of the biggest news story of the day. And, it's kind of a what's on my mind type thing. So the NBA, the Players Association, so the biggest news was that they've extended their negotiating period to Friday as they're trying to, work out their, issues in terms of starting the next season, with the whole pandemic, since they had to pause their season and then restart with the whole bubble thing. It pushed their season out too far. And now they're trying to figure out what's, the ample amount of rest between last season ending and next season starting. The league wants to start before Christmas. That way they can cash in on that Christmas holiday, which we all know is an NBA holiday. But the Players Association is pushing back, saying, well, our players need some more time. Why don't we start, around Martin Luther King Day, which is also a basketball holiday. The league is now pushing back on that, saying if we wait till mid-January, then we're in line to lose anywhere from $500 million to $1 billion. Not sure where those numbers are coming from. I mean, of course, it's probably from the lost revenue of those Christmas games, because every Christmas the NBA plays at least 5 games. So that's 5 nationally televised games that you lose out on. I get that. But that's a large number. We know players don't want to lose money. We know the league definitely doesn't want to lose money. So I kind of figure they'll work out some type of agreement by Friday. But we'll have to we'll definitely have to see. So with the league, what they're bringing to the table is, we start right before Christmas, December 22nd. Is I think the date that they're throwing out there. And they're looking to do a 72-game season. I believe that the players, in wanting to play mid-January, I think they want mid-January and I think it's like 65 games. Either way, the biggest issue is with the Summer Olympics not happening this year, being pushed to next year, the NBA obviously has to get their league in before the Summer Olympics, because NBA players will be playing USA basketball. So if you take the break off for the Olympics, then you're interrupting your season once again. Adam Silver doesn't want that to happen. He wants to get the season in before the Olympics. Then the players can go off and play, and then when they get back, they're into their off season anyway. So of course, with negotiation, there's a lot of back and forth. There are some reports from people within the negotiations that feel like they are somewhat moving close to a deal by Friday. There's a lot of optimism in the room, but we all know with negotiations they could break down any minute. So that is definitely definitely a story worth looking forward to. And then also a quick note in terms of the NBA. I don't know, I was on, it was ESPN or something, and Adam Silver also did say because of last season, the league lost, hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. Obviously, with no fans in the stands, that's no concession sales, no ticket sales, all of that. I get that. That makes sense. But I just want to say something to the people who like to comment on stories like that, where they talk about, nobody's watching because of the social justice aspect of the, pre-game and on the back of the jerseys. Post-game, a lot of players talk about issues like that or whatever. I mean, I'm going to need for the people like that, just stay off the comment sections. Because if you're one of the ones who aren't watching the game because of the social justice messages, then why are you commenting on stories? Because if you don't care for the league anymore, then don't make comments. Because all you're doing is come across as just being ignorant or whatever. Maybe you're just trying to troll people, whatever, but it's just annoying. Because it's the same message you're reading day after day. Well, I'll watch the league again when they start respecting the flag. And, it's just dumb. I mean, I actually got into a little back and forth with somebody on, I think it was Twitter. And now, for those of you who may not know, I think I said early on in episodes that kind of the reason why I did start this podcast was because I found that, putting messages in comments, you can really get fan bases fired up. And like I used to do that with LeBron's fan base or Aaron Rodgers in the NFL, Phillip Rivers, stuff like that. But now, the easiest fan base to get riled up are the, anti-kneeling, anti-social messages on jerseys and all that. That crowd, all it takes is one little phrase, they get worked up and they're all over comment sections. So it seems like lately they have been all over the place with, like I said, respect the flag, then I'll tune in again. Stand for the anthem, then I'll tune in again. And my main thing is, for them, they say, like if people at rallies and stuff want to shout out stuff, First Amendment rights, but like athletes for some reason, they don't have the same right. I don't get it. Doesn't make sense to me, but that's just them and their view. So I do know that Adam Silver did come out and say that they won't be putting, I did say all that to say that Adam Silver, I think he said at the end of the bubble experience, he came out and made a statement that next year, you won't see messages on the court or on jerseys, I believe. Which I'm sure some of those who are like, I'm not tuning in until that's gone anyway, may tune in. But I do have something to say to them. Just because they take, Black Lives Matter off the court or, Black Lives Matter off the jersey or, economic reform, education reform, all that, that doesn't mean the players aren't going to still say stuff about it. They're not blind. They're not deaf. If they see a story out there, they are within their right to comment on it. So if you had issues with it on the back of the jerseys, I guess once the game ends, you'll probably change the channel because you don't want to hear player interviews at that point. Fine. Don't care. You're right. Do whatever you want. But to sit there and try to act like because players are speaking out over stuff that they're witnessing in the world, just like you or I, that's the biggest issue with the league, is just plain ignorant and I mean, I could attach other words onto that statement, but I'll just leave it at that for now. So, yeah, you won't see it on the court. Not going to be in the jersey. But trust me, it will still be a talking point for NBA players. It's their platform. They're going to use it how they want to. Like I said, their platform. So, just wanted to say that real quick. And that is what's been on my mind. So now that I've done that, go ahead and talk about the main topic of this episode, college football. So over the weekend, there weren't as many big matchups this weekend as there were probably last weekend, but there were some interesting storylines that did come out of the weekend. One, you had the number one team, Clemson. You know, Trevor Lawrence didn't play. He tested positive for the coronavirus. He was out. Dabo Swinney did say that he is also out for next week's game against Notre Dame. But, of course, coming into it, most people are like, no Trevor Lawrence. Clemson still has athletes everywhere. They shouldn't have that hard of a time with BC. But it turned into be way more of a game than I'm sure Clemson was expecting. As BC went into the half with a 15-point lead. They were up 28-13. And Clemson did mount a comeback in the second half. You know, held BC to 28 for the rest of the game. Came back and won it in a close game. You know, BC showed well. I am encouraged by what Jeff Hafley is doing with that BC program. They finally have a quarterback there that seems competent enough to play ACC football. They have some offensive weapons, so, you know, BC is definitely a team that could be on the rise in the ACC in a few years, but, you know, Clemson got a good game out of them, was able to pull it out. But now the question becomes, you know, with Notre Dame being a better team than BC, will Clemson be able to get past Notre Dame without Trevor Lawrence? So that's something to look to for next week, which big game as Clemson's number one team. I believe they're still number one in the poll, but Alabama has closed the gap between 1 and 2 as Alabama blew out Mississippi State over the weekend. They won 41-0. I mean, Alabama did whatever they could, even without Jalen Waddle, their top wide receiver. But Alabama, like Clemson, they have athletes all over the field, and Mississippi State was just no match for them. Alabama now moves on with their season. You know, they already got the Georgia game out of the way, which was, you know, the big early season match for them. Then looking at the rest of their schedule, they have LSU next, but LSU is having a down year, so that's not the big matchup that it used to be. Now, 2 weeks from now, they have a match. They have the Iron Bowl game with Auburn. Auburn is back into the rankings at 24. So if Auburn continues their good play by then, you know, Auburn could be a top 15 team by then. And that could turn into a big, you know, resume building win for Alabama. Notre Dame, like I just mentioned with Clemson, Notre Dame played Georgia Tech. It was a 38-13 win for Notre Dame. Game was never in doubt. We know Georgia Tech is one of the worst teams in the ACC. They're a program in transition, so weren't expecting much out of them this year. Notre Dame, it was just good for them to get a good performance under their belt heading into that Clemson game. And now, like I said, with Trevor Lawrence being out, Notre Dame has to go into that game thinking that they have the opportunity to pull off the upset, knock Clemson from the unbeatens. And if Notre Dame is able to do that, that solidifies Notre Dame's spot in the playoff 4. So coming into the weekend, the biggest matchup on the schedule, we had Ohio State, Penn State. Penn State was coming off that loss to Minnesota week 1. No, not Minnesota. Sorry. Indiana week 1, where Indiana won in overtime with that controversial play by the pylon on the 2-point conversion. They gave it to Indiana. Indiana got the win. So Penn State was looking to avoid falling to 0-2 and hoping to get a big win against Ohio State, which if they were able to, would definitely kind of offset the loss to Indiana. Because if you get a big win against Ohio State, if you can run the table the rest of the way, that one loss, it doesn't completely eliminate you for the simple fact that you turned around and beat Ohio State. Well, it didn't happen. Ohio State won 38-25. Justin Fields had another great game, and now Justin Fields is a serious contender for the Heisman right now. With Lawrence missing a couple of games, that could hurt his chances to win the Heisman. And if Justin Fields continues this play, let's say Ohio State goes undefeated, Fields will get invited to New York. Well, we'll have to see by then if they're actually doing that. It'd probably be a virtual celebration type thing, but he will at least be in the running for the Heisman at that point, which I fully expect him to. And based off of what I've seen these weeks, he's clearly a front runner to me at this point. But there's some other names out there. I would still throw Trevor Lawrence in there. Jalen Waddle, before he got hurt with Alabama, could have been a guy who might have been in the running. Although we know the Heisman Trophy usually goes to quarterbacks, there have been a few years where, a running back or a wide receiver can win it. So, but yeah, I think right now, Justin Fields is the clear number 1. And then we'll have to see what Trevor Lawrence looks like after the Notre Dame game, if he's still playing at the same level before the positive test. But the biggest theme of the weekend was unranked teams beating ranked teams. Upsets. There were some big upsets over the weekend. I mean, you had Oklahoma State, who was ranked number 6. They lost to Texas, unranked team. And for a Big 12 conference that was already struggling to get, respect in terms of rankings and whether they could even get a team into the playoff, it was seen as Oklahoma State being their best bet to get into the playoff. But now with this loss to an unranked Texas team, which, Texas wasn't supposed to factor into any, Big 12 standings, or I don't know if they were supposed to be unranked all year, but they're going to be like a lower ranked team. So Oklahoma State suffering that loss, big blow for them. I don't think they have any other matchups on their schedule that could really help wipe out that loss to Tennessee. With the new rankings that came out today, Oklahoma State fell down to 14th, which, isn't... it's kind of a steep climb to get back up to the top 4. But they do have a big game against Oklahoma 2 weeks from now. Now, Oklahoma's ranked 19th, so they're ranked lower, but still a ranked win. And what they would definitely need is for Oklahoma to be probably in the 12 to 15 ranked area for it to mean a little more for Oklahoma State. But a ranked win is still a big deal. So that's the matchup that they're looking towards right now. They can't afford another loss. I mean, this one loss could keep them out anyway, but definitely a second loss, they'd be eliminated from any playoff contention. Michigan, who was ranked 13th and went into their matchup with Michigan State. Michigan State, another school in transition. They have a first-year coach, Mel Tucker. So, they're not a big factor in the Big Ten either. But they were able to go. No, this one was at Michigan State, but Michigan was not able to, hang with Michigan State, and Michigan tumbled from 13 all the way down to 23. They were the biggest drop in the rankings. So, looks like it might be another lost season for Jim Harbaugh. The only thing that he can do right now to salvage his standing in Michigan right now, at least amongst the fans, is if they turns around, loses to Michigan State, but if he can pull off beating Ohio State later in the season, trust me, those Michigan fans will forget all about they won't completely forget about the Michigan State loss, because Michigan State is a big deal to Michigan as well, but an Ohio State win would diminish the wound of that Michigan State loss in Ann Arbor. So that's what Harbaugh has to be looking towards right now. Can't have any other hiccups between now and then, but that is the only matchup that matters on Michigan's schedule right now. Another team, number 15, North Carolina. They lost to Virginia, another unranked team. And odd note about that one, that's apparently the biggest rivalry game in the South. UNC and Virginia. Never would have guessed that, but apparently it's a heated rivalry. So, did not know. And that one loss actually knocked North Carolina completely out of the top 25. So, it's probably a bigger drop than Michigan suffered. At least Michigan stayed in top 25. So, any outside shot North Carolina had at making the playoffs, you can completely wipe that out at this point. Then Kansas State, ranked 16th. When they were ranked 16th, I didn't think they were the 16th best team in the country, so I thought that was a little high to begin with. But they went ahead, lost to West Virginia, and they fell out of the rankings as well. So, Kansas State, you probably had no shot at the playoff anyway, but now it's just been confirmed you can play for next season. Of course that's not it, because there's still bowl games and all that, which I believe were announced, I think, early Saturday. They kind of confirmed that pretty much all the bowl games will be played this year. So, even though these teams lost on ranked teams, it's still something to play for at the end of the year. If you can get a good enough bowl, season doesn't feel like a complete failure. But the biggest winner on the weekend, now hang with me for this one, the Pac-12. Pac-12 didn't play any games at all. As I said early on in the episode, Pac-12 doesn't play until this weekend, but those four teams, plus Penn State, who fell out of the rankings as well for the first time since 2016, but those teams getting knocked out helps the Pac-12, because it does open up the door a little bit more for an undefeated Pac-12 team to make a case for the playoff. Now, of course, that is contingent upon Clemson, Alabama, Notre Dame, or Ohio State losing. Plus Georgia. Georgia would have to lose a second game. But if that were to happen, Then let's say an undefeated Oregon. Oregon might be the Pac-12's best shot going into the Pac-12 season getting started. But we all know USC, if USC can run the table, there will be people who want to get USC into a prominent bowl game because, you know, the USC brand is still a pretty big name in the college football circle. So that's definitely a factor as well. So, but with that, the Pac-12 can't have any, you know, hiccups at all. So the Pac-12 needs to have at least one team go undefeated in their conference to have a shot at the playoff. And as we've seen in previous years, the Pac-12 is a conference that's, you know, easily gets left out in terms of the playoff for because they're not seen as a strong conference or really as a big boy conference. It's always seen as, you know, Pac-12, kind of like the Big 12, puts up big numbers, but none of the teams are really that strong. So then when they do go up against, you know, SEC, Big 10, even Big 12, they never seem to really perform well enough against those conferences, at least the top teams in those conferences. So Pac-12 has its work cut out for them, but the doors open a little bit more after this past weekend. So for me, the playoff four remains the same. Clemson, Alabama, Oklahoma State, Notre Dame. Nothing happened this weekend for me to change any of that. You know, Clemson played a tough game with BC, but they didn't have Trevor Lawrence. They pulled the game out, so I'm giving them credit for that. But the, you know, best available after that top four, that list did change for me. I had, you know, Penn State in that group, Oklahoma State in that group. I believe I even had Michigan in that group, but those three are pretty much gone at this point. So Georgia, we all know, their only losses to Alabama. They run the table, then they'll have no problem, you know, jumping up there. If Notre Dame loses to Clemson, then Georgia becomes the fourth team. No problem there. Now, Georgia does still have, well, they have Florida coming up this weekend. That's the last big game on their schedule. So they can get past Florida, then they'll be fine. And even with that, Florida is one of those teams outside the top four that has a shot to get in. So you can basically look at the Florida-Georgia game as kind of an elimination. Yeah, I would say it's an elimination game in terms of playoff contention. Because, yeah, the loser of that game doesn't really have another big game on their schedule to try to jump back up. So those two, one will get canceled out. And then Cincinnati, who I think I mentioned my first college football episode, as a team that these top four schools definitely need to keep an eye on, because I see Cincinnati running the table. You know, they got past SMU and they got past Memphis in back-to-back weeks. I think those were the toughest games on Cincinnati's schedule. They have UCF in a couple of weeks, but UCF isn't the UCF that we remember from the past couple of years, where, you know, they were high-powered offense with a decent enough defense. So Cincinnati should be fine in that game. And like I said, after getting past Memphis and SMU, I think Cincinnati is going to be undefeated at the end. So they're going to have the argument, if Georgia wins out, has the one loss against Alabama, Cincinnati is going to be there knocking on the door like, hey, maybe we should be the fourth team over Georgia because we're undefeated. But Georgia's going to easily say that, you know, our only loss was to, at that point, Alabama could be the number one team in the country. So that's definitely a good loss to have. So I think Cincinnati could be the team who might get screwed out of the playoff this year. But with a 4-team system, That's what's going to happen. And then BYU. I don't know if any of you know this, but BYU is sitting at 7-0. And like Cincinnati, could very easily run the table. Their biggest game comes next week, where they face Boise State. Boise State is always a good program. You know, they get some guys into the NFL, so they have talent up there. And if BYU can get past Boise State, they will run the table. They only have 3 games left in the season, Boise State being one, and then what was that? San Diego State. And what team is that? North Alabama. So you can basically pencil them in as being undefeated. So looks like BYU, Cincinnati, and then the Georgia-Florida winner will be the teams ready to pounce if anybody at the top 4 right now slips up and loses a game. And so with that is a good place to end the episode. Do want to thank you all for tuning in. If you're new, hope you like the show. Whatever platform you're listening on, you can subscribe, or you can go to the Facebook page and follow, as well as Twitter at Chompin Podcast. Facebook page is Chomping at the Bit. You know, you can give it a like there, and also, comment on anything that you heard me talk about. You'll also find all the previous episodes there as well as the other podcast platforms. So yeah, drop a comment to the show. You can drop a topic you want me to talk about on an episode, or any questions you may have about, I don't know, whatever aspect of sports. Definitely put that there as well. Because as I said when I started this, I do want to make this interactive with you guys who are listening. So yeah, don't be afraid. And yeah, thanks again. Be safe out there. And I'll definitely catch you in the next episode. All right.